Hi, I'm Amy Heineman from Peekaboo Pattern Shop, and today we're going to learn how to sew a thumb hole cuff. The first thing we need to do is fold our cuff in half so the notches are lined up. You're going to have 4 notches on the edge of your cuff, and we're going to leave it open in between the 2 notches, and this is what creates the thumb hole. So you're going to sew from here to the notch, and from the 2nd notch down to the 3rd, and from the 4th down to the end. So I already did that on this cuff piece. So you can see I sewed to the 1st notch, stopped, sewed in between these, left another gap for the thumb hole, and then sewed to the end. Now you just need to fold the seam allowance over to one side like this, and then you're going to fold the cuff up. So my cuff's still inside out right now. So fold the seam allowance over, fold the cuff up, and make sure that seam allowance doesn't move. And now we're going to sew only on the seam allowance along our gap. You do not want to sew the cuff. So you can see right here, I just have 2 layers of fabric for my seam allowance. But then just inside, you can see where the cuff is. You do not want to sew on the cuff. So we're going to sew just a little bit past this line. So you'll be using more like a 3/8 inch seam allowance right here. And we're just going to sew right there to finish up our cuff. So I just sewed along the thumb hole opening only through my seam allowance. Now we need to do the same thing on the other side. So you're just going to flip it around like this. See, here's my seam allowance. And now we're going to sew right here only to the seam allowance. You should only be sewing through 2 layers of fabric. I just sewed through the seam allowance on the other side, so now it's time to turn our cuff right side out. So you'll put the seam allowances right here together and then just flip it over like that. And here's your finished cuff with a thumb hole. Now if you want to, you can top stitch right on the ends of the thumb hole opening just for reinforcement. And the little tiny sizes, this is a 2T. It can be kind of hard to get your sewing machine under there, but it will make the cuff stronger so that the seam doesn't have too much stress on it. So if you want to do that, you can go ahead and just do a bar tack here and here. And then this is ready to attach to the shirt. So you're just going to slide it over the shirt and line up the seam and the cuff with the seam and the shirt sleeve. So I'm going to line all those up and pin. You're going to have to stretch the cuff just a little bit to fit the sleeve. I'm going to go sew this together, and then this is done. So I'm going to position my serger presser foot on the inside of the sleeve and then just sew it together. So as I go, I'm stretching the cuff just a little bit so it fits the sleeve. Now you just flip the cuffs down and your thumb hole cuffs are finished.